Welcome back to Geeks and Grounds, a monthly game club and weekly podcast where we play games and brew good conversation together. I'm your host, Jenny Wyndham.
And I'm Joel Thomas.
And I am the director of the FBC.
You know, it really seems like it's all about family. Like, you're the director of the family. We're all a family who work in the oldest house. You can't leave. That's what family is.
Yeah, that's the meaning of family. You can't leave, you're trapped, and we're still on high alert, but at least we have this nice new title and a fancy new suit, which I was very excited about.
I was gonna say the button-up collared shirt you get at the end of this game is the coolest collared shirt I've maybe ever seen.
Wait, are you talking about the collared shirt or the suit? Because
underneath the suit, her white collared shirt has these sweet angles on the collar. I was like, the lapel of the shirt itself is like very cool. I was like, I would wear that. That's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. So for folks who are new, or if you need a little refresher, we have been playing the game Control all month long, and today is the finale podcast. I have, again, this is the second cup of coffee. I've been nursing it over the last hour or so because we did a double recording today. But I am super excited to talk about the end game of Control, as well as some stuff post game, because it's not over after credits roll. The second time.
Which time?
The first time the credits rolled, it threw me for a loop. But before we jump into that, we have a hefty pastry case today. Lots of snacks to dig into. The pastry case is our grab bag of topics. Industry, personal. We just talk about what we've been paying attention to in games and beyond. I had a follow-up because last week we talked about the New York Times article that came out about the thesis statement essentially being are graphics the reason why the game industry is seeing struggles right now. That's kind of what it was. We talked through it, critiqued it a little bit, dug into it, and I linked that article in the last newsletter. You should be able to access it because that was through the Internet Archive. I have a link here and also in the newsletter for you to read for a counter argument, a response to that article by Jason Schreier, who writes for Bloomberg. And the title was "Why So Many Video Games Cost So Much to Make," using virtually the same title. And he goes into why graphical fidelity is only part of the reason that game budgets have swelled. And he goes into a little bit what we already talked about, looking into the leadership, less so the artists and the artists' sort of technical requirements. But yeah, wanted to shout that out because that was something we talked about last week. And I know I followed up with saying I want to go read it. And then, this article came out right after. So I thought it'd be good to link.
You know, I've been reflecting quite a bit on this whole line of thinking because we have this very similar conversation happening in the ed tech space right now. And I just keep coming back to CEOs don't work for their employees, don't work for their customers. They work for their investors or their boards or their, shareholders. And that disconnect often leads to people creating things that appear valuable, even if they're not actually valuable. Like, the appearance of value is actually the only thing that most CEOs care about. Like, that is their job description, is to appear to increase in value so that you can get a better return for your stakeholders. And that disconnect just feels so pervasive throughout so many industries right now. And the more I was thinking about our video game conversation, the more that just really kind of hit me in the face. It's like, oh, I've been having this conversation about education, but it's happening in the gaming industry too, and most other places.
Yeah, I think one of the threads, because when I was on Blue Sky, there were actually a lot of developers talking about the New York Times article in particular. A lot of folks were voicing their frustrations with it. And I am not an artist, so I can't speak to this exactly, but there was a artist on Blue Sky, video game artist, who was talking about how the work it takes to create something in realistic style versus a stylized style, that actually isn't that different of a time amount of work. You might have some discrepancies here and there, but you are making the same number of assets usually you are making the same, like you're doing the same level of
Mm.
work. Just because something is realistic or stylized doesn't mean it necessarily takes more or less work. Depending again on the style. And so they were coming at it from an art perspective that I thought was really interesting, because I hadn't even really thought that it actually isn't as big of a tech lift as folks make it sound to make something become a bit more high fidelity, or more realistic, photorealistic. And so that was a really interesting perspective. Again, I'm not an artist, so I can't confirm it necessarily, but there were enough artists retweeting or reposting and affirming that. So I thought I'd share, because that was something I didn't necessarily know as well.
Very cool.
The other big news that came out, which I thought was really normally we don't do like console stuff, hardware stuff here, but the Switch 2 just had its first look trailer come out last week, which was really fun and exciting. I thought it was really neat, especially because the Switch was hailed as the indie machine. Like, it was really the place where a lot of people went to get their indie games. They had the Nindy Directs. They had, they were known as the indie console. I thought it'd be particularly interesting to cover this because we cover mostly indie games here. But did you have any thoughts on the trailer when you first saw it, Joel?
I've got thoughts. I've got more theories on the Switch 2 than I have about Lost at this point. Between like controller design and like possible like extensions of utility there, the lock-in mechanisms that they show, and like the implications of those lock-in mechanisms. Like, I'm very excited for this system. Like, I love the Switch. I have the OLED one now. I've upgraded because I love the Switch so much. So I'll definitely be getting the Switch 2. The backwards compatibility for most games, I think, is a really nice thing for them to be doing. My only real frustration is a very real frustration, Jenny. It's all black, and I love the color schemes that Nintendo started releasing for their Switches. And it's like, where's my Animal Crossing pastel crossover? Where's my Hyperlight Drifter neon color pack? Like, give me my Mario Kart racing cross, like checkerboard finish. Like, give me the zazz. I want the zazz is what I'm looking for. And it's all black. Where's the zazz?
Yeah, I feel like since this is just the first look, I'm sure they're going to give us something to work with later when they have the direct in April. I was a little bit, in terms of the color, what really kind of gets me a little bit is the only color that's apparent is in the sort of rotator side, the rotating like joysticks. And what frustrates me is if I put like a cover or a skin on my Switch, those joysticks are still going to show. And so the coordination is going to be off. So it's like, either make it, like, honestly, I don't mind if it's all black. So then later I can like work with it. But now I'm like, well, okay, either I wait for an all black version, I'm sure they're eventually going to have a version that has like the white rimmed joysticks, but it's like, now I'm going to have to decide whether or not to like wait for that or buy the new joysticks. So that was a little obnoxious because I'm like, I can't even customize it because now the color is going to be off if I use the OG version.
Those jerks. And what I think the thing that I am most interested about, that like I can't believe it did not show up in their marketing materials anymore, is like, have they fixed the stick drift issues that the Joy-Cons had in the last iterations of the Switch? Like,
I think this, because this is such an early first look, I feel like they definitely do. You're right. They need to address it. But this was more of like, it's coming more than anything else. But yeah, I agree. I'm hoping they fix the drift. It looks like we've got sort of the mouse sort of use that's going to be coming through, which is kind of cool. Did you ever have a Mario Paint on the Super Nintendo?
I only my cousins, so I never got to like play it in the real like experience. What was that like?
Amazing. Mario Paint is a true classic, but what I loved about Mario Paint was when we got it, there was actually like a mouse version of your controller that you could use to play. And that was honestly the first thing I thought of was like, oh my gosh, the art games that we could potentially get with like a co-op Mario Paint somehow would be incredible, and I'd love to see that come back to the Switch, because I think we only have, if we have Mario Paint, it's probably on Switch Online, which I have not checked out in a long time. But yeah, I guess
Great question.
other than the visual critique that you have, anything else you thought?
No, very excited. Certainly will be purchasing. The question is, do I go for that like first release, or do I wait to get some specialty pack?
Yeah. I know that's
We'll
the
see.
tough part, because it's like, because again, you know that they're eventually going to release like a Zelda version of this. They'll surely have an Animal Crossing version of this. It's just when, and I don't want to wait personally.
No, yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I'm just gonna have to plan to shell out another what, $80-$100 for at least new color controllers at the very least.
One of the interesting points of speculation right now is if these tariff things happen, what that will do to the Switch might be the
Oh my
first
god.
like big consumer facing release that's impacted by that. So that'll be
Stop.
interesting.
Yeah, we're gonna see. I'm budgeting like again 80 to 100 for control, because what controllers, I haven't gotten a Switch controller in a minute. Those are like $80.
Well, if you get the pros, they're usually like 65.
Okay.
They're the more reasonable priced ones. The Joy-Cons are a lot cheaper. Um,
Okay.
I have a really cool purple pastel one that has these like neon colors. Like
Ooh,
it's a very, very fun controller. It's one of my favorite things about playing the
fancy.
Switch is when I get to pull out that controller.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see the actual like sort of the specs and like
Hmm.
how this hardware is going to run. Um, I don't think it's like, I think a lot of people are saying, "Oh, is it going to be as powerful as a Steam Deck?" I don't think so. I feel like Nintendo doesn't usually go for like huge leaps in their hardware.
True.
So I think in terms of like the graphical stuff, we aren't going to see anything too wild, but I am excited to see what this thing can handle eventually.
Agreed.
The other bit of news, and this is really exciting, DICE and IGF both put out their nomination lists or their finalist lists for awards. DICE is a show that happens every year in Vegas, usually around this time, February-ish. And this is like sort of the both of these actually are events that are based on industry votes, less so consumer votes, which is what we would see more like game awards being a bit more consumer facing. This is more industry facing. So it's always kind of neat to see what the industry chooses to highlight over what consumers choose to highlight, because you
Hmm.
get a lot of like, again, I think in Indie Council we call them the weirdo picks, because it gets weird and it's really fun. And honestly, these two shows are the ones that I like to look at for what are the games that I should be paying attention to, especially IGF. So, wanted to highlight really quickly, and again, I'll link in the newsletter. But for the DICE Awards, there are tons of nominations to celebrate outstanding achievement in character. Shout out A Thousand Times Resist. I know folks in the community probably are very excited to see that. I think A Thousand Times Resist also got outstanding achievement in story,
Hmm.
and adventure game of the year. So that's really cool to see. But what's neat is there are a lot of indies represented in this.
Yeah, as I was scrolling through, I was noticing that same thing, and like, I really like the categories in the Dice Awards a lot. Like, it
Hmm.
feels like they've partitioned it. One of the really hard things with like Game
Right.
of the Year awards is that the games are so hard to compare when they are of like vastly different genres or
Right.
vastly different like lengths of time to like play. And so the way they've kind of broken this out between like achievement in story versus achievement in sound design versus achievement in
Hmm.
character, like I just think it's a really cool way to kind of slice and dice the awards themselves. Family game of the year, that lets lets games shine within their own respective categories a bit more.
Yeah. And I think what's nice is because the panel of judges are drawn from experts in those fields of the industry, you can get people who can nominate and sort of vote for and speak to these categories really well. Because I think if you went to a general audience, it may be more difficult for them to determine like a technical achievement. Because, like, for the average consumer, what does that mean? And what does that look like? it could be a very wide number of things. But for these people who are in the panel going in and nominating and selecting these finalists, they have a more consolidated definition and a more cohesive definition of what each category means. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
I gotta say, as I was scrolling down for role-playing game of the year, I don't know how I've never heard of this game, but Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth
Wait,
has...
oh my God, it's a Yakuza game.
Is it
Wait,
a
have you?
Yakuza game? I was wondering. It
Yeah.
has that design, but the cover image they chose is a guy in a Hawaiian shirt, like riding a dolphin and like pointing off
Yes.
into the distance. And I don't know how I missed this, but like, what a delight! What a joy!
It's absolutely bonkers. You would love the game. I think
I did
if,
love the Yakuza games, so maybe I should
yeah,
hop
this
into
is
that.
yeah, this is like a continuation. Did you ever play the version what is it? The Infinite Wealth, I think, is them in Hawaii, and Like a Dragon was the first like turn-based iteration of it. Did you play that one?
No.
No. Okay. I think I have not played either. I just have seen bits of it, and it's on my backlog. But I think the Infinite Wealth is the sequel to the Like a Dragon proper.
Hmm.
And they're both like extensions of the Yakuza universe.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm. And to highlight really quickly outstanding achievement for an independent game, because there are some titles that we've talked about, I know that a lot of folks are fans of. We have Animal Well, Balatro, Grun, Indica, and Mouthwashing. All titles actually that we've talked about in some form in Geeks and Crowns.
A great list of possible winners there.
Yeah, this is a list of absolute bangers. Do you have any predictions? I guess you might not have played Indica yet.
I have
But
not.
you've
I
played
remember I played the demo
others.
for it, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
really liked it. You know, it's hard. Like, I really don't know anything about the Dice Awards in
Right.
general. I don't know if award shows work, or awards in games work like award shows in movies. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
would be kind of bummed if like Balatro and Astrobot won a whole bunch of awards in
Mm-hmm.
this series. Like, not they shouldn't win any, but like, it's kind of cool seeing so many different types of games on this list. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it, for me, I just kind of hope that there's some different ones that pop up than what came through in the Game Awards.
Yeah, I think so. No predictions for which one you think would win outstanding achievement. Holding your vote for now.
I've only played one of them, so I don't know that I can
Oh, I
give
totally
a...
thought you played did you I thought you played Animal Well as well?
I did play a
Or
few hours of Animal Well. That is
okay.
true.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've gotten through a couple of them, but
Okay.
I don't know that I don't feel qualified to
Mm-hmm.
give a strong recommendation there.
That's fair. That's fair. And they're all very, very good.
I can tell you that in outstanding achievement in story, somehow Thank Goodness You're Here is on that list, and I
Mhm.
would not vote for that one specifically. So
Dang, coming here to
I'm dropping the
pull
hot
games
fire,
from
guys.
the nominations.
That's what I have. I have negativity for you today.
All right. And then to hop over to IGF, this is an indie focus. So DICE is both indie, AAA, everything in between. IGF are indie games specific. It's the Indie Game Festival. This is the event that happens at the same time or during GDC, which is the Game Developers Conference. What's really exciting is that to be nominated for an award in this, the game actually does not have to be out yet. So you have games that have been nominated that are out and available to play. You also have games that are not yet out, but one of the, I guess, contingencies for submission and for acceptance of the award is that you plan in general to come out within about 12 months of this award ceremony. So some of the games that were nominated, for example, Consume Me, which got 5 nominations, and I'm so excited and proud because Jenny and team they're making something incredible with Consume Me. I've gotten to play some early builds and it's amazing. That game's not out yet. So some folks I know in conversation with other people, they're like, I've never heard of this game. I've never played it. How is it nominated? It's because this award ceremony is a little bit different, and that games don't have to be released yet. I wanted to highlight also that Balatro, Indica, and UFO 50 got a bunch of noms as well. And some folks may be wondering, where's 1,000 Times Resist? It's because they won awards last year. So they were nominated for, I forget which one, but they were nominated, I think it's for Nuevo. And I think they either won or were a finalist, but they were in the last year's. So that's why they're not in this year's.
I was curious, and I don't think we talked about this. I did finally pick up UFO 50. And I spent probably a good like 4 or 5 hours playing through it. And I'm gonna be like honest, Jenny, it was not for me.
Yeah.
I was kind of bummed. I love retro games, but something about how these games, like the experience felt for me, I felt like I was playing like all mobile games or something like that.
Oh,
And
interesting. Yeah.
I don't like the mobile game styling and like experience is not something that has ever really resonated with me. And so I think like I was seeing games that looked like the retro games that I love, but played like mobile games that I do not love. And so I just
Could
couldn't
you
reconcile those
describe, I
things.
guess, like what about mobile game? Because like what about mobile games do you not love? I'm curious, just to get more specific there.
Yeah, it's tough to describe, but like infinite runners and like games where it's like procedural generation of like the next place where you're at, like um those types of games that are like, we play games and we're talking about blueprints in our next week's game where like there's procedural generation. Like I don't have a problem with that as a rule, but I feel like in mobile games that is used to like quickly get things out, and oftentimes it's not built into the story in any way that I can understand.
Yeah.
And if it's not part of the story, usually it's not something that I'm going to appreciate. But when I played through a lot of these games, I just felt like, oh, I'm playing like someone's like mobile version of what they remember Battletoads being, and a mobile version of what they remember Zelda being. And that for me just didn't quite scratch the itch.
Yeah, that's fair. I think again, it's like, I think UFO 50 is for kind of like every game. It's got its specific audience, and you weren't the audience. That's cool.
I was bummed too.
I wonder
was
too.
Like, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I wonder too, because for me it was a little overwhelming at first, because like there are 50 games to pick from of varying. I will say there are some games that I really bounced off of, and so I'm curious if you went in and you maybe looked up some games that you thought you were maybe more predisposition to like, versus maybe hopping in at random. Because I think what helped me was relatively early on, I found about 3 games that really stuck. And then it offered me the sort of, it gave me the grace where I'm like, all right, I'm willing to trust this game and hop into others, and I will be okay if I bounce off. But again, it also may be the format and the style is not for you.
Yeah, I think I made it over the course of the, like, I was on a flight. It was like over the course of the 5 hours that I was like really tuned into this, I think I played probably 20 plus of the games. Dang, and just did not have a good time. Like, that's fair. It just found myself getting really frustrated, and like this is not like a talent problem, but just like it doesn't feel good to me. I can't really articulate it better than that, I don't think.
Hey, you know what? That's why there are so many games. So there's more experiences for everyone to pick from.
Yeah. And absolutely no shade or hate to people who love it. I know a lot of people love it. I wanted to love it, just wasn't for me.
Yeah, that is fair. I think a couple of shouts that I wanted to give for IGF was Despelote. That is a game that's also not out, that has been nominated for a fair number of awards. That's really cool because I am very excited for that game. I think it's going to be a really good one. And also Blueprints got an honorable mention in the, I think it's pronounced Shumas McNally Award. But that's what we're going to talk about next week. So just wanted to highlight that as well. I'm excited because I think I'll be attending both of those awards, so that's pretty fun too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I'm at GDC every year, and I've never actually gone to sit through the IGF, but I think I want to actually try this year because, I don't know, I figure at some point I probably should go and attend the show itself. Usually by that time for GDC, I am so exhausted. I just hang out either in my hotel room with friends, or we're out like getting pizza and just trying to like rest. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think this year I'm going to try to actually go.
Do you think I could get a job as like a seat warmer, like they have at the Emmys, where it's like when the video game celebrities have to go to the bathroom, I can come and sit down so
Yeah.
that it looks like there's still a lot of people at this show?
That'd be great. It'd be super fun. Well, I'll see if I can put in a word.
This is my chance. Like, what are the seat warmers sign up for next year?
Let's see. So that's it for the industry stuff we wanted to make sure and just note and cover. Again, all the links will be in the newsletter that comes out following this podcast. So sign up at geeksandgrounds.com. Before we head on to the main brew, what have you been up to playing, watching, listening, and reading, Joel?
A few things. I have a book update. I finished Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, one of another Sanderson joint. I really liked this one. I thought it was like a very fun kind of like Your Name-esque like body swapping story, which is very cool. I've always been drawn to those. I will say a lot happens in the ending in the Sanderlanche of this one, and he had like 4 different characters explain what happened, which I absolutely needed. So there's kind of a convoluted ending, but now that I've heard the explanation a few times from a few different perspectives, I'm in. I love it. I want more in this world. I very much enjoyed it. Have you picked this one up yet? I think you have it.
Yes, I actually, as soon as I finished, what is it, Wind and Truth, I barreled through Yumi as well as The Sunlit Man, because I hadn't read both of those. And so I read like 3 books in the span of probably 12 days. It was a busy holiday break.
What did you think of Sunlit Man?
I overall liked it. I think I liked it more because I started it and did not finish before Wind and Truth. I am happy that I finished Wind and Truth first and then went back to it, because at first it didn't quite hook me going back, because I had context and I was immediately like, I know what's going on. I know who this is. I just need to place like time, almost sort of figure out where we are in the timeline. It made more sense. Loved Yumi. I also thought it felt very just like, it gets heavy in moments, but it did. Your Name is a great comparison. It feels really lighthearted compared to some of his other works in terms of the plot and sort of the like body swapping silliness of it. And at the end, this is not a story spoiler, it's more of an inspirational note, but he mentions he was inspired by Final Fantasy X, which I was like, oh my God, because the whole time I thought of Yuna and her role and story in Final Fantasy X. And that was really cool, because that felt very validating, because it was like, I'm making this connection. Am I stretching it? Am I not? And
I'll know those references this year.
Yes, you will, because everyone, we're playing Final Fantasy X in November and December. So yeah. But what made me extra happy is in the book, did you get the version that had like the illustrations in it as well?
No.
Or you audiobooking it?
No, but I have a book, but I don't think it had any illustrations.
Let me give you my copy so you can like, look at the pictures. The pictures, the whole time you look at the pictures and you see very strong Japanese influences, but also I was looking at it and I'm like, I feel like this is very Korean. Like, this feels very Korean to me, looking at some of the outfits, some of the descriptions he made. And so the whole time I'm sitting there wondering, was he inspired by Korean culture as well? Or like, is this just a weird coincidence? Is he bringing Asian things together and not going to acknowledge where they're from? But at the end, he does acknowledge explicitly. He's like, I drew from Japanese culture, I drew from Korean culture. And I was like, that was so cool. So some of her outfits in the illustrations were like hanbok style, and I was very excited to see that.
So good. Would recommend. Very much enjoyed it, especially if you're a Sanderson fan. I also last week I talked about the new anime Sakamoto Days. This week I'm going to plug another new anime called Zenshu, which is in episode 3, just dropped I think today actually. And the story is essentially like it's an isekai where a director of an anime series who's like this like genius mastermind of anime direction. She dies at her desk in the very beginning of the first episode and gets isekai'd into essentially the world of like one of her favorite classic animes. So think
Oh
of
my
like a,
God.
a late 1980s, early 90s anime like
Mm-hmm.
movie. She gets isekai'd into that world as herself. So she's wearing like her hoodie with her like hood up and like the whole thing. And like she knows the story. And so it's like her integrating with this world. And the whole like conceit is she still has like the tools for doing animation. So her power is like when things go bonkers at the end of
Oh.
every episode, she does like a Sailor Moon like magic girl transformation where she like starts using her drawing and drafting tools to like draw her way out of this problem.
Oh,
And
how fun.
every time she does it, she's like referencing some major cultural milestone anime in history. And it's like this love letter to anime. It's so cool.
Oh.
The first episode, like the big thing is like a Nausicaa in the Valley of the Winds shout out. So I would very much recommend this anime so far, 3 eps in, and I'm super enjoying it.
Are you watching on Crunchyroll?
This one's on Crunchyroll. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
cool.
Sakamoto Days is on Netflix.
Yeah.
And I know this is on your list, so I'll just pop in here to say Severance season 2 episode 1,
Oh
baby.
my God. I am so happy we're back, and I'm so sad that we have to wait a week between each episode. That's all. That's like really the major sentiment I have. Yeah, how did you feel when you watched the premiere?
Fully agree with you. I like so first of all, this whole first episode is just innies.
Yeah.
We haven't seen anything from outies yet. And so like my very sincerely held opinion is they should have at least released 2 episodes so we could have caught up with both. But I thought the first episode was so interesting. Like the way they're
Hmm.
playing with time, the like the distrust I now have in some of the main characters. Like, like
Yeah.
I know that I think we've talked about me setting up a channel to talk about Severance in the Discord because like I've got theories and I
Yes.
don't want to just put them out there for people who haven't watched the episode yet. But
Yeah.
wow, how about you? Thoughts?
Yeah, I have a lot of theories. I think I quite again, personally, did I want more episodes? Yes, of course, but I loved that we did only see one perspective in terms of just the innies this time around, because again, it makes the fruit that much sweeter, right? Because we're waiting another week just to see what's going on outside. um yeah, it's incredible. I am fully sold on the second season so far. I feel like they gave me enough to work with in terms of creating theories, and they gave me enough of an evolution in some of the character behaviors already that I am
Mm.
really excited to see where we go. And some of it, I was as we were watching, I was kind of predicting out loud as I was watching with Sam, and I was thinking, there are some character decisions where I was like, I hope they do this because I think it would be far more interesting and it wouldn't be the easy way out. And some of those paths were taken. So I'm
Hmm.
really excited because some of the characters are going to have a bumpy ride and I cannot wait to see more. But yeah, no spoilers other than it was just everything
Yeah.
I needed it to be currently.
I think I'll also give like a major nod to the actor that plays Milchick, Mr. Milchick. This dude is an absolute phenom of an actor. Like the way he embodies these characters is just like I feel intimidated and insecure and like he plays them so well. And then I watched a movie a couple nights ago called Sweethearts that he's in, and he plays just a radically different, like genuinely supportive, kind, loving character. And it was just like seeing this dude's range was incredible. So I really like this dude as an actor,
Yeah.
and I hope to see him just in everything in the coming years.
Yeah. He's incredible. I haven't seen him in anything else. I will say he's going to be like Milchick is such an iconic, and he plays this role so iconically. It's like a Kathy Bates situation for
Yes.
me where I'm like, I think I will always now see him a little bit always as Milchick. Like Kathy Bates, same I'm blinking on her character's
Misery or
name, but
something.
Misery. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I only see her as the character from Misery, and in everything she's in, I'm always like, but when's the twist gonna happen? Like, when is she gonna snap? So I think I see him and Milchick in his like, what was it? The disco
I'm just waiting for him to go
party.
in defiant jazz
Yeah,
mode.
exactly. I'm waiting for the disco party experience every time I see him.
So true.
And I will say, for me, Dylan and Irving are like
Ugh.
superstars. They are my favorite characters. They were last season. That has continued into this season. I think they are the arc that I am most excited to watch.
Genuinely
both
cried
of their
watching their
arcs.
interactions in this episode. Like,
Yeah.
I was just blown away.
Yeah, it's very good.
What have you been getting into?
Other than Severance, I've been playing surprise Spirit Swap. Again, for folks, it is a selfish, selfless, self promo, selfish, not selfless. Right now we're getting ready to launch on February 3rd, so that is really, other than Control and the Blueprints demo, that's all I've really had time to play, because we are testing as much as we can, because we're an indie team and we are our own QA, so that's fun. And then reading The Hollow and the Haunted, which is a YA disaster queer enemies to lovers romance. Wonderful. It's got like Romeo and Juliet vibes, where you've got the two houses, and they both don't like each other, and the children of each house kind of find each other, and destiny ensues. So yeah, that's been very fun. Notable release for this week, just sort of a quick rapid fire. We have Cuisiner, which is already out on PC, but they're getting their Switch port. Very cute dungeon crawling game where you collect and you defeat enemies that are basically food items, and you come back and you create food for your restaurant. Super cute. Lonely Mountains has their like snowboarding version out. So if you remember Lonely Mountains Downhill, they've got their snow version. Like, what is it called? I for some reason did not put the subtitle here. Let me get. It's like snow or ski something. Lonely Mountains. Waiting for the website to load.
Lonely Mountains when the snow falls.
Snow Riders.
Snow Riders.
Yes. But basically this is like the same idea as Lonely Mountains Downhill, but they have added like 2 to 8 person multiplayer, so you can ride down snowy hills with your friends. You can be both chill and unchill with it. And then going back to the show notes, we have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, not an indie, but we're fans of Final Fantasy here. So it's getting its PC release for anyone who's been waiting for that. It's coming out the 23rd this week.
Very cool. I will say, speaking of the Lonely Mountains, Jenny is a big Ed Sheeran fan, and she introduced me to the songs that Ed wrote for the Hobbit movies, which I did not know happened. Fun little side note that in my yoga class this week, they played those songs, and I was like, it was all I could do not to be like, sound the horns, like we must ride to Isengard. Like, it put me so in the mood to like not do yoga, that's for sure. So
I was gonna say that's a really interesting choice for yoga class. But yeah, God, I do love me some Ed. It's like, it's funny because he's like the artist that is most sort of like, I don't know, I don't want to say like basic in a negative way, because I think that's not a negative necessarily, but he is the most like maybe mainstream like singer songwriter artist that I really enjoy, like unironically. I think people meme him all the time, but I'm like, dude, his music, like, it hits for me. It's so good. Like, I mean, you've been in my dance classes. I feel like I've choreographed most of his music.
I can think of at least 4 times that I've danced choreo from you.
Him and Hosier, I think, are the 2 that I'm just like, give me is the sad boy songs. Just honestly,
into the veins. I'm ready.
Yeah, give me my sad boy singing. It's so good. So that's it for the Pastry Case. As always, again, links will be in the newsletter. Subscribe at geeksandgrounds.com. And let's head on to this month's brew. The final sip of Control that we're going to be taking for now, at least.
When you're here, your family. Control.
There is so much to this. The end of this game. Okay. Actually, I'll let you go first.
Well, no, please. I was gonna say, like, it feels like so few big plot points happen in this, but it's like a cascade of information that you get in this like last section of the game.
That's okay. That is the perfect summary, because I feel like nothing happened yet so much happened. And I actually had to sit, and I ended up going back and looking up not just at my notes, but going online a little bit, because I did not understand, like, some of it I don't think I even comprehended what was going on until after I had a chance to reflect. But in the moment, I was like, I guess the game wants me to go explode these things, so I'm gonna do it. And maybe I'll understand what's happening later. I don't know. But it was a little, I don't want to say anticlimactic, but I felt like the ellipses at the end of this story, there was an ellipses, and I wasn't expecting that big of an ellipses. I think I was expecting a little more closure than what we got. Not necessarily a bad thing. I think I overall enjoyed it, but I was surprised at how little felt resolved.
I think that's totally 100% fair. And like there's actually like as soon as we started talking today, I was like, oh yeah, there's one really big question that I completely forgot to look up. So I'm hopeful that it's one that you did look up so that we can talk about it. So I mean, should we start with where we left off?
I guess one of the things I wanted to do, yeah, let's start where we left off, actually. Let's do that.
All right. So we had just gone to the containment cells where they kept a bunch of the objects of power and Dylan, who was in that big cage. And for starter, to start things off, did you remember to save our friend that was staring at the refrigerator?
Yes, I did. And great side quest. Loved it.
Great side quest.
I'm sorry he didn't make it.
R.I.P. my guy.
What was his name? Was it Philip?
Philip. Yeah.
I think.
Poor
Sorry,
Philip.
But I will say the entity that you fight with that side quest shows up later. Did you know this? In the DLC. So this is why I'm like, you need to play.
Oh, I haven't played the DLC. Okay.
Because yeah, that's all I'll say. I don't want to spoil it for you. Because again, we're talking base game here today, but I will just say the entity you fight does show up again in the DLC, and it is fascinating.
It looks like it looks like Diglett but white. And huge. That's how, like, I don't know how else is, like, maybe a giant, like, if you stretched out the head of a sperm really long.
Yeah.
That's what this bad guy inside this refrigerator kind of looks and feels like. I don't know if it feels like sperm. It looks like that. And I was just like, it's almost like a meme moment, and I actually think there are a couple of meme moments in the ending of this game, and this definitely felt like one of them. That this guy gets eaten by the refrigerator, and there's this like cosmic horror giant stringy white thing that you're gonna like deal with as a part of the ending.
Yeah, it was great. I am happy because there are some side quests I did not yet complete, because I'm currently playing through a DLC and also wanting to get through some of the side quests. So there are some side quests I haven't done yet, and that was one I made a point to, because I thought the intro to it was so comical. I had to revisit it before I ended the game, and I'm really happy I did.
100%, 100%. And so what we had been told, like big picture story wise, was that Dylan has turned himself in the executive office.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, did you go straight there?
Well, afterwards, I talked to Emily first. I talked to, oh my gosh, I forget the name of the security guard. It starts with
Marshall.
an A.
Oh
no, not Marshall.
Ati.
Not Ati.
Ari?
The security guard. I feel so bad. I talked to him, learned a little bit about some interdepartmental tension between like the research folks and the security guys. Got a jukebox token, which I have not done any of the jukebox quests.
Me neither.
which I plan to do before our discussion this month. Man, I'm blanking on his name. I'll have to look it up while we talk further. But I talked to a few folks first. Did like the old growth side quest. I also started but have not finished he gives you a side quest where you're like grabbing pouches from his buddies who are like all turned into hiss. I started it, haven't finished it yet. And then I decided, you know what, I just want story. So I went to talk to Dylan. But what about you? Did you do side quests before that?
I definitely talked to all of those characters, but once I did that and kind of like unlocked all the side quests, I was like, okay, I'm just going to mainline the story from here. But I also went to Emily as like my first stop. And it was so funny because like, I don't remember being very distrustful of Emily when I played it the first time. But after our conversation last week, or maybe it was even the first week, and you were like, what's going on with her? I've just been like way more like eyes up whenever I'm talking with her. And the conversation you have with her in this part of the game is buck wild. Like the degree of like, oh, I'd like to weaponize these things. And like, your brother might be getting controlled by the hiss, but he actually seems more normal and stable now. It's just like, what's your deal, girl? Like,
yeah, I feel like I don't distrust her, but I was surprised by some of her, like she seems to have like a bloodlust that I was not expecting. And so I was like, maybe this is just kind of a gremlin quirk of hers that, you know, that's funny. But I think by the end, I'm cool with Emily, but I am very interested to see her if she comes up in future installments of this game, and like if we get to see more of what her personality is other than like helpful lore giver, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I think at the end of that interaction, Jessie says something or thinks something in her mind like, how often does the word mad scientist get used around here? And I thought that was so apt for the situation. But yeah, I went from there, unlocked all the side quests, and then went straight to Dylan. And you have such a creepy conversation with your long lost bro there. Talk maybe a little bit, what was your experience like going in, seeing him hovering there?
Okay, I don't know why, but they like focus in on his feet at one point, and I'm like, that is a gnarly foot shot. So that is like one of the that's
you
like
can't give that away for free.
I know. I'm like, whoa, Dylan. So there is that, but also I feel like, I mean, the model that they use for his character is very just like unnerving. I feel like they did a really good job. Whoever did like the mocap, whoever did the modeling and animation, like they did an incredible job of making him feel like just something about him. Every time the camera focused on him, I was just ready to end the conversation, but I also knew we had to stick around for more. I think what was really interesting is he's talking about himself in the third person. And my prediction didn't quite come true, but sort of came true in the fact that the hiss seems to have taken him over and control him. So Dylan is not actually our brother Dylan. He is currently a puppet for the hiss. So when we're talking to him, we're talking to the version of him the hiss are letting come out. And
it's also interesting that like he's calling himself P6 as that, like that's why he's kind of named himself in this entity, which is what they've said they called him for being like a candidate to take over the director. So it's like it's really interesting to me at this phase that like as far as we know, the hiss have adopted this name as like we want to be the director. That's why we are like P6 is the name we were choosing. That to me is just like a really fascinating point of interest there.
As he's talking, I think one of the more interesting threads of conversation that we go into, we have like the main plot conversation, but also we talk a lot about dreams in this section with Dylan. And I think it was really interesting to hear about, you could go back again and again to sort of hear the different dreams that he gets. Did you end up doing that?
I went through 4 different dreams. How many did you get through?
I think it's the same. I think I went through however many they did until they told me basically to stop.
Oh,
the game just didn't let me.
I just kind of got tired after 4. So
okay. I went through until the game just wouldn't let me talk to him anymore.
Okay, got it.
But they also, I'm trying to remember what else we talked about in this conversation. So we talked about our dreams, which we can get into in a second. And basically, Dylan slash P6 hiss. They're saying, but you need to like look for the truth. There's a slide projector here, and if you go find the slide projector and do some stuff, that's going to give you the truth. And in my head, we already know that the slide projector is the object of power that came from the event in Ordinary, which both of them basically were a part of. So this is now, it's like going back to childhood memories at this point.
Yeah, and I think he references in here that like the hiss came through the projector. So there's questions like, well, who set up the projector? Like Dylan's been in captivity. Like we know that Polaris was kind of helped fight off these bad guys when they were kids. So like, did Polaris come from the same place the hiss came from? P6 slash Dylan makes a big point of trying to make you, like as the player playing Jesse, not trust Polaris and not trust the Bureau, that like they're using you is kind of a big theme of this conversation.
Yeah. And it's interesting because this whole time I have been sort of paying attention to the ways that all of these big external forces are sort of pinpointing into Jessie and sort of trying to get her to do these different things. Like the Bureau wants her to do some stuff, even on an individual scale, like Emily has requests, and Arish, I think Arish is the name of the security. Yeah. But like everyone has these requests, the board has requests. And so it's interesting to hear P6 slash the hiss come in and like try and reinforce that. And it was actually at that point when they were really pushing that narrative, I was thinking, okay, everyone has their own agendas and everyone's going to be trying, like that's sort of the nature of what's going on here. Everyone has an agenda, but because they are so resistant to me wanting to do the Bureau's thing and sort of figure this stuff out, it makes me feel almost more willing to trust for now what's happening with the Bureau to at least get rid of the hiss.
Yeah,
it's
only
like
one
the
faction is like making people float creepily in the air, and only one faction is doing that.
Yeah, so I think it was interesting because the whole time, I was like, obviously the hiss is like the biggest concern at this point, but I think the resistance of the hiss to Polaris and the Bureau in particular made me sort of like not the opposite of raise my hat, lower my hackles, I guess, a little bit at the suspicion I had against those two entities. Polaris in particular, they reacted very strongly. Dylan did too, when I think they were aware that Polaris was with Jesse. There was a moment where he yells and he's just like, "You're here too. I can't believe it." And so it's like, yeah. And we learn a little bit more about Polaris as we go forward.
So we do get these dream conversations, and like for the 4 that I listened to, I kind of like try to just in one sentence capture what I felt was an interesting takeaway from them. Is it cool if I just kind of roll through?
Yeah, go for it.
So in the first one, there's a big conversation about how Jesse and Dylan are both like can be like male or female names, and Jesse, Dylan, Faden sounds like one person. And we've been seeing a lot of notes about like synchronicity, and it's like, oh man, are we in what it's supposed to make you wonder? What I was wondering is like, is this one of those like, oh, we're actually the same person and we got split in 2 somehow? So that was kind of like dream number 1. Dream number 2, there's kind of this story and rhyme that he tells about an ordinary girl who works in an ordinary world, in an ordinary town, yada, yada, yada. And I think this story kind of comes back a little bit later in an interesting way. The third seems to be more informational about like kind of the hiss being set free. And the fourth is the one that to me is one of the most intriguing of the 4 that I listened to, which is that in between dream and reality, there's a person named Mr. Door who kind of stands and lives at the nexus of all worlds and all realities. And that he is preventing the hiss from moving or going to other worlds.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was like a really interesting idea. So were there any other notes or like themes that you're picking up on through the dream experience?
Yeah. I can't remember what number it was because I think I got a few more. There was one dream where he was like, I had a dream that you were actually not the director and you were just this boring employee, which, and this was just a boring video game and this is all just boring and stupid. And which is interesting because it comes up later when we play in a future chapter. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was like, what? Um, and I think there was a dream where he said that he was dreaming and seeing Jesse and Dylan talk about this dream. And so this sort of like recursive loop of a dream where he sees himself doing these actions, and he's trapped and that's it. And so, yeah, it was really interesting to hear these dreams.
Mm-hmm.
I think the musical one, I think he mentions, I don't know if that was the same one where he talks about the ordinary girl in the ordinary.
Yeah,
Is
I
that the
think
one where he
so.
intros it, where it's like, I had a dream my life was a musical?
Yeah. That was the one.
I thought that was kind of interesting and fun,
Mm-hmm.
mostly because of the predominance of music as well in this game. Like, music plays a really strong role in propelling the story. In fact, especially in a follow-up chapter that we're going to talk about today, music plays a huge role in making the story progress forward. So I thought that was just an interesting reference. Um, I don't know if, okay, so I have not played Alan Wake, but I know some of the basic story of Alan
Hmm.
Wake. And I think what I thought mostly about that dream you mentioned, where it talked about the the writer who wrote a story, that made me think of Alan Wake. And I was
Ooh.
thinking, what if he was dreaming about Alan Wake? And like, what if Alan Wake is, I don't know the plot, but like what if Alan Wake is like writing something that like either informs our world or informs like how objects of power work or something. I don't know. So that
That's
was like,
so interesting.
and I know we talked about this before starting to record, but it made hearing about that dream and then seeing a couple of the notes that you collect in this section of the game that talk specifically about Alan made me really want to play the next game, or
Yeah,
not the
I've
next
got
game, but
to now.
Alan Wake. Yeah. Like, there's so many Easter eggs here or secrets that are like getting connected, and I just don't know the background. But I'm sure people who've played Alan Wake probably are like, "Oh my god,
All of the Easter
yeah,
eggs.
everything's coming together!" And I'm like, I have puzzle pieces. That's all.
Yeah. This is the like Marvel Avengers coming together at the end of the credits kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure people who played know these things, but yeah, it made
Hmm.
me feel excited to play Alan Wake. To be very honest.
Yeah, I feel the same. And you're actually pinging something else for me, which is, we'll talk about like the story elements of this a little bit later. But there's at one point we learn about different forms of powers people can have, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
through the Threshold Kids TV show and whatever. And they talk about ESP, where it's like you can sense things and like know things and read people's minds
Yeah.
from the,
No interruptions.
right,
Sorry.
exactly, no
Yeah.
interruptions. And there's another one where it's like telekinesis, where you can move things with your mind. And we know that Dylan has powers. We have heard like on his own before the hiss. We have not heard anything about what they are, like what those powers are. And the way you've just described the Alan Wake thing makes me wonder if his powers were specifically ESP, because Jesse's powers are specifically like the
Mm-hmm.
telekinesis stuff. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
just gonna like think about that while we're chatting today.
Yeah, that's really good. Ooh, very good. Um, but yeah, I think after that, you just are on the hunt again for the slide projector.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you walk around, explode a lot of things.
Yes. And this is, I do think the game gets a bit like, this is where it's like I start feeling kind of the heaviness of repetition here. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going in this room, I'm going to see a red light, there's going to be baddies here.
Yeah.
um you're at this point you're being told to go check out the like the candidate program.
Mm-hmm.
And Trench like gives you one of those voiceovers. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Well, okay. And I think this is the first time in my notes that I wrote down about candidate P7.
Hmm.
We have not heard of a P7 up until this point, right?
Right.
Okay, I was like, did I just miss that
Nope, that was
completely?
it.
Okay, so we heard about this candidate P7. And
Hmm.
so at this point, I'm like, who's P7? And my earliest prediction was that it was probably maybe Jesse. But
Yeah.
I started thinking, and it's something I've been thinking about throughout this game, especially because there's a chapter earlier in the game called like Old Boys Club.
Right.
Um, I found it really interesting, this focus on Dylan as like the prime candidate, as the candidate that they were most seeming to prep for this role, when we have this P7 candidate who we've honestly not heard about until this point when Dylan tells us. And it seemed like to me that Jessie is the first woman in the directorial position. And I was like, I don't know if it's just because the pictures aren't like, the pictures just showed us Trench and like Trent and his buddies, and so maybe it's just like maybe there was a woman director back then, but it seemed like this, we haven't talked about how this does seem like a very male dominated director line. I guess.
Yeah. Meanwhile, most of the like surviving leaders that we find are like badass women kind of thing. Like,
I know, very interesting.
Very interesting. Just something to notice. So as we're navigating through the like candidate wing, there's so like not a lot happens in like the gameplay story,
right?
But we learn so much.
Mm-hmm.
We learn that Darling was in charge explicitly of training Dylan. We learn that Trench at some point lost his family, that something came home with him from work.
Mm-hmm.
We get this terrifying Threshold Kids video, like this no interruptions thing that Jenny was referencing earlier, like the creepiest puppet show thing I've ever seen.
What is it? Uncle Mr. Bones and was it I think? I forget.
And we are eventually realize that we believe the projector is going to be a little bit deeper in.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in the actual candidate wing, you find out that someone was killed by Dylan during this training. Just one person, just one dude, just one guy named Roberts. But we also see that they have been tracking Jessie explicitly for years. They have a photo wall of her where you can see that she, like, people have been following her. She makes a comment that she's like, see, I wasn't paranoid all this time. Like, people were watching me. What were your thoughts when you kind of realized that, like, okay, Jessie is P7, they have been watching her?
The main question, again, I was just really curious. I was like, what is their deal? What is the point of having one candidate under essentially lock and key in an attempt to prime him for this position? And sorry, yes.
Keep going. Say it.
No, I don't know what you want me to say.
This is like a control, like
exactly. Yeah, it's like a control experiment, right?
A control and a treatment group. Like, because I have not connected these dots. You're brilliant.
Yeah, okay. Because you have her as the other candidate who is allowed to like essentially do what she wishes, and they're using this. And she even mentions as you like get in an elevator at some point, she's like, "What kind of experiment are they running?" And I was like,
"Oh my god,
they're running an experiment maybe to see what best primes someone to be the director, possibly." But it was also fascinating to me because as you're exploring the two rooms, the P6 and the P7 room, there's a video, and I think it's with Mr. Darling, where he's responding to Dylan having killed Roberts. And he says something along of like, boys will be boys. And again, this whole mentality, it's been sort of throughout the game there, but this was the most overt, like, okay, what are we saying about like the sort of men and women in the workplace, the expectations that you're putting on them? Like, I don't know. I still have to dig into that a little bit and sort of what Jessie means as sort of what seems to be the first woman in the directorial position.
Yes.
But yeah, I just thought it was really fascinating that this whole thing seems to have been an experiment to determine perhaps what devises the best candidate for a director of the Bureau.
And it's like you learn that like Trench was kind of foisted into the position that like they weren't ready for it when the last person had to leave for whatever happened to them. It's also fascinating to me, like, it's so unethical but like
Oh,
one of the main things that you are finding throughout this part are recordings of Jesse's private like therapy
yeah.
sessions where she's like unpacking what she remembers happening to her as a child, and like you can hear the therapist who's just like, no, like obviously does not believe her that any of this stuff happened. You
Yeah.
learn that Jesse has been in like some sort of like psychiatric ward or something along those lines. Like
Hmm.
to me, that was one of those things where it's just like, these people let her suffer and like live in the darkness, proverbial darkness,
Hmm.
uh for no discernible reason,
Yeah.
outside of
Both
control and
her,
treatment groups.
both her and Dylan, it's like both of them. And I think Trench even says like this is like these two. I think he specifically talks about Dylan, but I think both of them are perfect candidates because they have no parents anymore. They're
Mm-hmm.
orphans. Like no one's going to be, taking care of them. So they're ours to do with what as we need. And it is horrible. You're just like these men, specifically Darling and Trench, who are just willing to sacrifice anything to get what they need in terms of information and data and further their processes. And so it made me really dislike, maybe not the bureau as a whole, because I think I don't know, it's kind of a cool bureau, to be honest. It's like kind of a cool place,
I've
but
worked there.
it's like the leadership within that place
Mm-hmm.
leaves a lot to be desired, for sure,
Oh,
historically.
yes, and I think we'll have to keep coming back to that point. It's interesting too, because like as we're making our way through it, this phase, we learn that the slide projector and the slides work together to create portals. We already
Mhm.
know that the portals are how the hiss came through. We learn that Jesse burned all but one of the slides. They only have one
Yeah.
slide left, slide 36, and they like send their rangers out to explore these worlds.
Yeah.
And that essentially like something has happened within this that like all went wrong, that is somehow leading to what we're experiencing now.
Yeah. I like, they call them like astral divers, I think.
Yeah.
What's terrifying, and again, it's this idea of, for whatever reason, to the leadership, the ends justifying the means.
Mm-hmm.
Where the astral divers, you collect these reports of people who are going in, 20 times, they come back, and I think even I forget where, but somewhere there's a mention of like there's cognitive collapse with these folks. They're coming back and they're disoriented.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know where they are. Like people are not okay after doing these dives, and yet the management still says we're going to keep doing it because we want to figure out what's going on.
Right.
Which
It's
again,
interesting too, like in this phase, like we have what I think was one of the most visually interesting experiences, where like you're making your way towards where you believe the side projector is,
right,
and you look out like a black window and you see just a red house sitting in the middle of this building.
yeah,
To me, we've talked about this before, I love it when houses are inside places that they shouldn't be there. And when I saw that house, I had forgotten about this sequence, but I was like, God, this was one of my favorite parts of the game, was like going in and seeing this house. We later learned that this is like they've built a scaled down diorama of the entire town of Ordinary, and hauled the entire town landfill into the building, into the bureau. That whole sequence, like where they've tried to recreate Ordinary, I thought was just like nothing really happens within the story, but you're finding tons of artifacts, and then being in this scaled down town, I thought was so creepy. What was your experience like going through that?
I totally agree. I think the creepy, again, you sort of know this entire time they have eyes and ears everywhere, but this is when it really feels like you see the evidence before you. It's not just that they have eyes and ears everywhere. They're recreating your childhood home. They've taken the whole dump. They've gone through extraordinary lengths to cover up what has happened in your hometown. I think you get this media where it's a radio caller who's calling into this late night radio talk show, and they say something like, oh my gosh, Ordinary, nobody knows, it's conspiracy, the whole place is fine, but the people have vanished. And you really get a sense to the degree that this bureau has power and is willing to use it to again just pursue their own goals. And so again, it's like, I know the hiss is the primary concern. They're definitely the worst of the things we're dealing with. But at this point in time, it reinforces like, what is the deal with the Bureau and its goals and what it believes it should and can do to achieve them. And as the director, it's like, how much of that will I be able to actually impact in the future?
Yeah.
As Jesse, because we also have the board to think about. And it's like, is the board the one heading all of this? And if so, what is their purpose and their goal? So,
man, I have so many lingering questions with the board, even still.
Yeah.
We do find, like, we go through the dump, we fight baddies, we find Darling's office there. We see a completely, like, despondent Darling who's decided he has to give up on Dylan because, quote, so many are dead. And it's just like, yeah, dude, boys will be boys. Like, this is the logical outcome of that thinking. I'm sorry. And he has moved the projector to a secret location in dimensional research, which is going to be the ashtray maze, which, you know, we've been talking about for a while now, but we're finally going to get to experience.
Yes, I know. It was the princesses in another castle moment was really funny because I was really excited to get to the slide projector and to see it gone. I was just like, oh my gosh, game. How many more waves of enemies do I need to go through to find this thing?
Many more.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I wanted to note too, I didn't write this down. I didn't write down the numbers, but I wrote down that there is a discrepancy in the number of slides, because I think they said they had only accounted for like 7, but Dylan said that there were 8, and like there is a discrepancy in sort of the accounts of how many slides there even are. And so it leaves things open, I guess, for future installments or DLC or sort of explanations as to what's going on. But I thought that was a really interesting note that I took as well.
100%. The whole, we're finally going to get the story here for what happens on this expedition pretty shortly. But at this point, it's time for us to go to the maze. See that we still can't use it and that we have to go talk to maintenance. And so we go to find our boy Ati, but he's on vacation. He's on island time now.
He's like, vacation time, holiday time is holy, I think is what he says.
Yes.
And I'm like, I respect that so much.
You know, honestly, like, put Ati on a t-shirt. This guy, he knows what's up.
Yep.
You end up going through a really trippy sequence to find him. Like you go behind a painting, you go through this like industrial set of columns to nowhere. It almost feels like you're in a like this nether space.
Yeah. I think it's actually called Nowhere.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You fight waves of enemies, which what's your frustration level at this point? Like for me, it's like, well, I'm on God mode, so like whatever, but
yeah, I have been stubborn and not changed and not gone to God mode, mostly because I just really wanted to be able to see if I could do it. I will say this is not where I hit sort of my point of, oh my gosh, I just want to be done. Like mentally, I guess I'm sort of there, but I wasn't quite there. I was still, I'm a glass cannon, but I think from also what I've seen from people talk about in the Discord, even if you put points into health, it seems like you're kind of a glass cannon no matter what. And so I'm like, I think I don't have anything in HP. I don't have anything in melee. I just have all energy, all launch, and the seize mechanic where you can like kind of take over the minds of some of the hiss. I really loved using that, and I put most of my mods into like decreasing the seize time. So I'm doing okay with the waves. I'm wanting them to be done more to progress the story than anything else.
Yep. It's kind of like, okay, you've gotten to the point where it's time to unlock your story note, but we're going to make you fight through 3 waves of bad guys before
and I'm like,
happens.
No, just let the momentum carry itself. Let's go.
I fully agree with that.
Yeah.
You do eventually find Ati. Ati is going to give you headphones so that you can listen to a song while you make your way through the ashtray maze. So once again, we're finding like songs being really key to this experience. Is it at this point that we go through the maze itself?
Yes. I did want to highlight before we go through the maze, as we're following Ati's visions and like going through maintenance and the different areas of the facility, there were a couple of cool moments where you see like the natural world, like a
Mm-hmm.
real video of the natural world overlaid where you're running in the bureau. And I just thought visually that was really cool. It felt very trippy, but in a good way.
Yes.
Um, and so, yeah, I don't really know what to make of it or what it means. I don't know. I just thought it looked cool.
You can kind of hear the waves lapping in the
Yeah,
distance.
like
I
Ati
loved
just
it.
living his best life, I guess.
Yeah. He's wasting away in Margaritaville, essentially.
Yeah.
So we do get to go through what I feel like is also a big meme experience in the ashtray maze. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. Like, they have a custom like alt rock song a la like Avenged Sevenfold playing, and as you are running through this maze, like instead of it being circuitous, like the walls are moving for you, doors are opening for you, baddies are popping out for you to take them out. And like at this point, I am just like, I feel so strong and cool.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't know. It's one of the most fun sequences. It's like you mentioned the anti-climax. It's like this feels like it should be the climax of the game.
Yes. Thank
right?
you. I
And
100% agree.
Everything else should just be story falling action. But you don't get that, unfortunately. You get like a lot of stuff after this sequence.
Yeah.
But the visuals of this hotel changing and like rooms turning and hallways expanding, I thought was just like a lot of fun.
It was incredible. I think out of everything, actually, even finishing the game, I think this is definitely the highlight sequence of the whole thing for me. It felt cool. I felt like a badass. The music, the way that they sort of allowed it to progress as you progress through the maze, just it felt like you were in a badass movie or music video. And I thought like I really did. I was like, this must be it. I must be at the end, because like how can you get any bigger than this other than maybe a boss battle, like the final revelation of the boss battle. And so yeah, this was definitely the high of the game for me, and it made the rest of the game honestly a little anticlimactic and confusing following it. But I will like, what I loved is even at the end, Jessie, the character, as she's running out of the maze, she's like, that was badass. Or she says something along that line.
Yeah.
And it was exactly what I was thinking. I was like, that was badass. Like, so that was very, very fun.
Totally agree. I also like, I put a lot of effort into flight for this round and like the slam down, and like it just feels so cool to do that. Like the sound design and the like flow of the animation when you make that attack, it just feels very cool.
Yeah, I think this was actually the section, I don't know why I hadn't put it together, but I didn't realize until the ashtray maze that you could levitate and simultaneously like throw projectiles. And so this was where, again, it was like that revelation of being able to be levitated and shooting and throwing projectiles. Again, it just all combined to make me feel so cool.
Yes.
I was like, this is the power fantasy right here.
Yeah.
Even not on God mode.
Yeah, even not, because I remember feeling the exact same way when I played it normally the first time through. So it's really fascinating. I think it's a really, really fun sequence, and probably like one of the things that people like probably latch onto when they think back on Control is like how cool this experience is. And it was fun because last week when we were talking about the ashtray maze and how like it was such a cool concept, I was like, just you wait. Like,
I know. It was so funny because it was not what I expected. I think going back to when I first encountered it, I thought it was going to be more of a puzzle.
Right.
And so it was interesting because it was not at all what I expected, but it was honestly better than what I could have conceptualized. So I'm happy that it did not match what I was thinking at all.
So what I'm wondering, Jenny, is if we should go through, there's like 3 beats of the story. And maybe we should just like hit those beats and then try and like explain what's actually going on.
Yeah, I think so.
Sense?
Yeah.
So like beat 1 is we learn that Darling found essentially like the giant spherical body of Polaris inside the projector and brought it out. So Polaris's physical presence is being kept in the bureau, and you're going to release her, essentially. Number 2, we learn that Trench had the hiss attached to him, which is what he brought home from work. Somehow it led to the death of his kid. His wife left him. And he's how the hiss kind of got in.
Yeah, he's patient 0.
He's patient 0. 3, after you free Polaris, you realize there's nothing actually inside of this containment unit that they've been like sourcing Hedron from. Hedron is sourced from Polaris. And so you kind of, Jesse gets taken over by the hiss, and credits roll. It's like, well, it's over. Credits have rolled, but then the credits start looking funky. We know we play a lot of games where fake credits roll in this club for some reason.
We love a good fake credits.
We love it. You come back and you are office worker Jesse, ordinary girl, ordinary world, working in an office. Eventually you realize that you're in like a vision and that you are experiencing the hiss right now and you can break out of it, which leads to you breaking out of it, and then making your way through the astral plane where you find the projector, you find Dylan, you stop the projector, you cleanse Dylan, and then kind of the game true credits roll, and now you are like, when you come back, you are the director in your new suit with your really sweet white collar. And that's kind of like the end of like the mainline story game, like the beats that have happened. But you learn a million things in between that. So like, what are some of the big like takeaways that you experienced during this ending sequence?
Okay. I mean, there's a lot. Okay. So I think, to rewind, after the Ashtray Mage, we're in like what they called the Hedron chamber. That's where your like Polaris is being stored. You have to go through and basically destroy each satellite. I will say this is where my frustration point kind of kicked in with the waves of battles, simply because I think it ended up being right before the very last satellite, where there were just like the way the enemies were positioned, and I don't know, like the number of enemies, I just kept getting like one shot knocked out. And so I had to then, the last control point is like far enough away where it's like it's pretty annoying to have to run all the way back. You have to like levitate, run through rooms, go up 2 sets of stairs, and then climb the satellite sort of spiral again. And so I think this is where I was just feeling like, okay, I almost wish they had, in their design of this section, just allowed you to sort of God mode it regardless, so you can feel the momentum from the Ashtray Maze continuing up as you try to like save Polaris, you know, in your mind before you realize, you know, Polaris isn't there. I loved the the fake credits. They got me because when you think the hiss takes over, I think Dylan starts saying Jesse starts saying the same chant that like Dylan was saying, where it's like, you are a worm or something like that.
Worm through time.
Worm through time. It's like something about touching something wet. I don't know. Which I am still fascinated by the chant. I can't make heads or tails of it.
Yeah,
personally, I haven't really like delved into that yet, but that got me. It got me good. I did not realize we had a fake credit sequence. And so I initially was like, oh my God, did I like accidentally get a bad ending? Did I need to go back and do the side quest before I got the like a real ending? What is happening? So that was really, really fun. When we got to chapter Take Control, and we are in this like Stanley Parable dystopic bureaucratic loop, like the true nightmare of the game, being stuck as an intern in a company, having to clean
the nightmare of the
cups.
game is just normal jobs that most of us have, actually.
Yes. I thought that section was so good and so creepy because you know, I did each task once, and then you realize it's like they're never ending.
Yeah.
Here you have to do something else. And as you go through the loop each time, you see the hiss further infiltrate Jesse's mind. And so seeing like initially you see people slumping against the ground very oddly, and some having bags over their heads, and then you do the loop
Oh,
again,
the
and
bags.
and then you see people hovering. And so I thought they did that sequence incredibly, to give you that just continuing sense of just dread and sort of not fear, but just making you feel the dread of that thing going horribly wrong and trying to figure out a way out. Slide projector. There is a lot about the slide projector we have not talked about,
Yep.
including the actual events of what happened in Ordinary. So I'd love to go into that. I guess I'll let you start, and then I can add to that.
Sure. So my understanding is Jesse and Dylan find the slide projector as kids. They invite their friend Neil over to like play with it with them. They're having a good old time. They have names for the different slides that they go visit. But eventually Neil, maybe under being bullied, tells a bunch of town ruffians and hooligans about the slide projector. They steal it, go to a cave, and start transforming. They become, I think they're called like mud dogs or mud monkeys.
Dung monkeys or
dung
something
monkeys.
like that.
Yeah, that's what it is. And there's also someone called Not Mother. And it sounds like what I think we can infer is that like maybe the hiss has corrupted these entities or something like that. Jesse and Dylan somehow work together to get the projector back away from the bullies. Jesse burns a bunch of those slides. And what we learned there is that the slide that's remaining, slide 36, describes structures that look like a hand. They often call it like the hand slide or something like that. And that this is where Polaris has been actively keeping the hiss contained. Like Polaris is the fire break in the slide, keeping the hiss contained physically. So it's like a combination of things go wrong, like Darling removing the Polaris physical structure from that slide is what allows the hiss to hitch a ride with Trench, who ends up being patient zero for the hiss.
Yeah.
But without Polaris or Hedron being brought into the physical world, they wouldn't have been able to build the Hedron, the HRAs. So like all these things are like cascading, like Ouroboros style things.
Yeah. And I think this for me connected the dots of also Trench's paranoia. So it wasn't human Trench being paranoid about what Darling was doing necessarily. It was his Trench essentially not wanting Darling, from my understanding, to build these the HRAs so that the hiss can actually do what they need to. So that made a lot more sense to me why Trench would all of a sudden become so paranoid of all of his closest confidants and coworkers.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't make the connection. I thought the Unmother was just like another entity. I didn't even make the connection that it was like a hiss corruption.
It might not
potentially
be. That's how I inferred it, is like this might be actually their mom who has been corrupted by the hiss, and like maybe that's where they call her the Not Mother or whatever it is.
Yeah. But yeah, I love just sort of the extra lore that we got essentially with sort of the slide projector, and how what happened in Ordinary was this other event that didn't really even like, it has to do with the game because it's the sort of initiating event for all of this. But I appreciated that we got, I think, a lot of extra context that helped, again, fleshed out the world, which is, I think, the game's strength. Trying to think of anything else. I don't know. Was there anything you learned in particular that you thought was really interesting?
I think it's important that we do call out the elephant in the room, which is the most unbelievable part of this game. The thing that is like, I cannot suspend my belief enough to accept this. And that is how completely jacked Dr. Darling is. We see him with just boxers on at a certain point, and the dude has triceps the size of like Captain America. It is absolutely astounding. And it's like, I'm sorry, sir. I can no longer believe that you're this like desk worker who doesn't have
bumbling
time for life
scientist, yeah.
outside of the office, because you're clearly doing like 2-a-day workouts. Like you are out there using the creatine, like you're putting in the
Jeez.
work. Like that to me was the one thing that like I just feel like not enough people talk about. Hashtag wise
I actually
Darling
don't even
jacked.
remember him being in his boxers. Like I don't even remember when that is. So
I don't remember, like it's, you know, when things have like completely broken, it's like
yeah,
one of the multimedia things you can watch like
that's
the whole
so
video
funny.
of. But yeah, he's absolutely jacked, and it's just like it
That's
doesn't make any
amazing.
sense to me.
Oh, I missed it. I think I saw a music video that he did, which is hilarious.
Yes, it's right before that.
I missed it then.
Did you this is actually, I think,